Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the February 10 work session of the Ann Arbor City Council. We've got a lot to discuss tonight, so Mr. Dohoney, you have the con.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening to all of you. We have 4 topics we're going to be covering tonight. First up will be citywide solutions. It's actually not a city project per se, but we're helping to facilitate its entree into Ann Arbor. You'll hear about this software that will enable people who are looking for housing options to find information. So this is something that Councilmember Ghazi Edwin flagged for us, and we've been meeting with the developer, and so you'll hear a presentation about that. This will be your first presentation from Monica Boot, our HR director, talking about things she's working on and looking forward for how the function of that office will be unfolding in the coming months. Those are 2 relatively short presentations. And then, even though the comp planning process is still underway, you'll hear an update from the staff about some of the themes that are emerging from that process. That'll take a little bit longer. And then we'll end up with a presentation on the solid waste function. We've never really talked to you about how we do, what we're looking at, what the obstacles are, what the opportunities are. So we'll take about a half an hour to present that to you. Because the topics are so different, we would ask that we do Q&A after each topic. That's particularly for our first gentleman, so he can move on to wherever else he's got to go. So with that, it's my pleasure to present Dominic Anzalone, and he will talk to you about his software.
All right. Hello, my name is Dominic Anzalone, Citywide Software. I'm the founder, CEO. I think to give the full definition of what we're doing, I'll start from the very beginning, which is 13 years ago in college, I started a company called College Pads. And basically what College Pads did is it would partner with universities to create a marketplace for housing off campus. Before we started that company, students would go all over the place to find housing. Mostly they would look for rent signs, and it was just very tough to find the middle market landlords, the affordable landlords, and landlords with a scattered site portfolio like houses and smaller apartment buildings. And so we partnered with Marquette University in 2013, and we built out a platform with them. In that first year, more landlords used it than we thought were off campus, and more students used it than we thought lived off campus. So we had a really big hit. Fast forward 13 years, we work with almost every university in the country. There's about 5 million students a year that find housing on our university platforms across the country. So we've really created a successful way for students to find housing. About a year ago, we started a new company called Citywide Software, where we aim to do this with city governments. So the exact same value proposition that we had for universities, we're doing with cities now. And the thought process is that the city branding has the power to bring everyone together. So we can get every landlord in the city to participate. We can get every renter in the city to participate on one platform. And by using the city brand, we'll come up first on Google. We'll be able to get most renters to find us right away. And there's a lot of tools we want to put in there, so we're not doing this for sure here, but we can use things like code enforcement data on every single listing that is on the city site to basically educate renters on what kind of property they're going into. So today, if you're a renter in the city, or a middle-income renter is a better way to describe it, you have no idea if a property is in bad standing with the city. You're probably not going to be able to find the market rate affordable units in the city, just because if you go to an apartments.com as an example, all you're going to find is the luxury apartments on those sites because it costs about $40,000 per year to advertise on those sites. So if you're a smaller building that is not charging as much for rent, you're probably not going to pay to advertise on apartments.com. So the way we're solving that is by having this city logo site, city-sponsored site, be the go-to spot where we won't charge landlords like that to be on it. And we think we can go out and get every single landlord in the city to participate on this platform. And so we think we can give inventory to the renters that they wouldn't typically have. So we think at the end of this, we'll be able to point to how many lower income renters we helped, how many middle income renters we helped, and how many renters went to the more luxury units in the city also. So I'll kind of show it to you because I think that'll be helpful to see. So can we pull? Oh, it's up. Okay, perfect. So, so this is the University of Michigan's site that College Pads has with the university. So when a student comes in to get it, you'll see this disclaimer on the site. So we want to make it really clear that we're not endorsing or promoting any property in the university area. And they would come in and they would see all of the college options in the market. And we're listing the housing fair here, so we do stuff like that. And then they could scroll through all of the listings in the campus area. And then they would search through the pictures, the amenities. And then this is where they would contact the property group also. So what we're doing today, this is Kenosha, Wisconsin. We started with Wisconsin because we're based in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. And so here you can see how we're using the City of Kenosha's logo. Oh. Will it pop back up? Oh, okay, perfect, cool, all right. So a very similar disclaimer will pop up to let renters know that we're not promoting or endorsing any property on the site. We'll use the City of Kenosha logo like we are on this platform. It's the city domain, so it's apartments.kenosha.org. And we went out and we got every apartment in the city that we could find to participate in this platform. So what you can see is that we have the code enforcement button there, so you can see code enforcement for every property. We built out an entire affordability section of the site. So there's government subsidized affordable, and then there's market rate affordable. For the government subsidized affordable, you would click a filter, and it basically takes you to a new site where you could search by what subsidy you're looking for. So whether that's a Section 8 or every city has different standards, but you can kind of see how Kenosha breaks it down. And then you can go back to market rate housing. And so what we're trying to do is combine what traditional affordable is with market rate affordable. A lot of times affordable housing has a huge wait list, and we think a lot of those renters don't know that there's naturally occurring affordable housing, and mostly because it's really hard to find. If you go, again, to an apartments.com, you're just not going to see it. If you go to Facebook Marketplace, you're not going to see it, so you're just not going to find it unless you're really driving around looking for for rent signs everywhere. And that's the issue we're trying to solve here. And so we've done 7 partnerships so far with cities in the last 6 months, a lot in Wisconsin, and now we're kind of bridging out. And basically we use the same contract that we use with the other cities that their city attorneys really vetted a lot, and we worked with Atleen to vet it here. There's an out for the city at any time, so we want to make it so it's as risk-free as possible for the city. We hold the city harmless from almost anything. We have all the insurances you would need. That's kind of it, I guess. So I'll open it up to questions and we can dive in.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions from council members? Councilmember Malik.
Thank you for this presentation. I know when I've been in the market previously for an apartment, I've definitely wished something like this had existed at the time. One thing I've heard, though, about kind of the decentralized model is it can really guard against landlords from colluding on price. Because, you know, if you don't know what everyone else is charging, you can't kind of bid up, if you will.
Sure.
I guess, how would you argue against something like that with an aggregator website like this?
Yeah, I think most landlords still find a way to know what other landlords are charging. You know, they care about profit a lot, so they'll go out and hunt that down. I think a obviously a tough thing to solve for sure. But what we're trying to, the flip side of that is what we're trying to do is give more options to the renter. So I think right now, if a renter only has 50 options when they're searching, or let's say even 10 options when they're searching, we're going to open it up to 200 options. And so you're certainly going to find a better price point, a better landlord, a better location, all that stuff. So information is key. I think right now, if you talk to a renter looking for that middle income tier, I think they would tell you that they don't know about almost any options that are out there. And so we're going to really open their horizon a lot on that.
Councilmember Medina.
Thank you, and thank you to my ward colleague, Councilmember Ghazi Edwin, for kind of initiating this conversation. But I guess my first question is similar. I think we've actually seen some examples of where landlords are actually already starting to kind of collude with one another around pricing, using software that helps them set pricing, things like that. Have you noticed any trends, or maybe it's too soon to notice these trends, where when it's easier for folks to be able to find maybe those hidden, more affordable units, are you seeing trends where actually some of the apartments that are listed are reducing their prices over time to be more competitive?
It's really tough to see that data happen that way. And I think you're probably talking about like Yardi and what they were doing. Is that what you're referring to?
There are a number of softwares we've heard of where they can see real time what the market is for them.
Yardi and Trada, they're doing it with a lot of the big apartment buildings that are out there. And so typically you see that with the mega complexes, especially in student housing. And it's really hard for the smaller buildings to participate in something like that because their product is so unique. So they typically wouldn't do that. And so there's not really a way to solve that, I think, except for giving the renter the same power that the landlord has, in that, renters should be able to see every price point in the city then. But yeah, for sure, the mega complexes around the country have found a way to do that. Basically, they're all sharing data. We know all the college landlords from working with them. They all share data to know where to be on price, basically.
And then this is more of a question for kind of your business model in terms of, you mentioned that we think we can get every landlord in the city on this. Who's actually kind of doing that recruitment to get folks to list on the site? And then what is, as you continue to grow as a business, as you're, it sounds like you've got this model for colleges, but as you're continuing to grow now the city model, what's your model for sustainability long-term as, more apartments come online? Are you reaching out to them, or is that responsibility on the city? Who maintains the site long-term?
It's a very good question. So we would have a rep full-time in the city who would do nothing but the city site, and their whole job would be to form relationships with the landlord. So the hardest part of this business is not the software side, it is the landlord side. And so really the value that we're bringing to the renter is that we're going to have every property for them, and then the data on the site's going to be up to date at all times. And so to do that, we have to have relationships with them where we're either updating their property information, or their property management software feeds us their data. So when they change a price point on their own website, it changes the city website. But yeah, it's a big job to do that for sure. And it takes about a year to get every single meeting. But our promise is that we'll meet with every landlord, whether they're a mom and pop duplex landlord or they're a super big complex, basically. And if you saw the college site that my old company, College Pads, has, we did that already in town, where every single landlord on this page we have a relationship with. And you could see all the house inventory. And so really with like the University of Michigan, the goal that we had with them was to go get inventory that nobody else had, like apartments.com. Because if you go to apartments.com, it's just the apartment buildings. You're not going to find any houses on there or 5-unit apartment buildings on there. So it'll be an ongoing thing forever, though, where they'll be here just meeting with people.
Thank you.
Okay, Councilmember Gaziano.
Thank you, Dominic, and thanks for coming out here and sharing this with all of us. So just to give some context, so when I worked at Detroit Disability Power, as an organization, we helped Detroit City Council, their government, to develop a site called Detroit Home Connect. And Detroit Home Connect also allows renters to use fields like accessibility. Does it have a ramp? Does it have an accessible kitchen? And it really helped to improve placement for people who are housing insecure, who often will be on a wait list and then they'll get somewhere and it's not accessible. So I was put in contact with you actually through the mayor. And I wanted just to clarify, so some of the fields that you could add could be, for example, accessibility.
Big time. And so right now, there already are filters for example, you'll see senior living on here, and we'll do like senior living, accessible housing. So a lot of those things will go out and we'll try to find those apartment buildings that are friendly for those features, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Thank you. And what they found in Detroit is that providing these additional features, as well as, housing by income size, has helped with reducing, as I said, housing insecurity. I have another question. Is it possible to, I'm sure that the Renters Commission will have some involvement in this, but for example, linking tenants' rights resources on the website, or how to file a complaint against a housing provider? Is that something that's a possibility?
Yeah, so a big part of our college sites that we had is that we would have something called renter education. And so we'd go out and we'd actually use like student legal services to do videos and put other content out there to teach students how to sign a lease or what to watch out for. We want to do the same thing at the city level. A lot of those city resources already exist. So like in Kenosha, we link to their city resources, or we have a renter education. And then so we just kind of list out all of the resources that the city has already put together in kind of a friendly way. And again, here we're trying to put video content out to basically dive into the main things that people should watch out for. And we're developing other tools like lease review with another city now, where we're going to use AI to review people's leases. A lot of cities don't like that idea, but some do.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's a little more aggressive, I guess.
I have one more question. You mentioned the ability to generate reports.
Yep.
So could, for example, a report include things like if it detects some sort of trends in like price gouging, for example, of between different developers or landlords? Is that something that could be included in a report?
So yes, we can give you all the data you want, including where price points are in the market. Something other cities are doing, are they're putting up when a landlord's charging high application fees, so things like that, where they're trying to gouge on the things that you wouldn't really know typically. So we can kind of try to put the data together however you want it, basically.
Okay.
But the city will always have a dashboard where they can log in and see the high-level data. So where are renters going in the city? What price points are they going to? Are they going to the, what type of affordable housing are they going to? And so you'll be able to pull that at any time, and then at request, we can really dig into the data deeper.
Yeah. In a majority renter city, I feel like that would be really helpful data to have.
Big time.
So thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yep.
Councilor Briggs, perhaps this will be the last one so we can move on to the next, because we're busy plate.
Yep, sounds good. So
Councilmember
two
Brooks.
questions. One is, would you anticipate that College Pad would continue to exist?
Yeah, absolutely. So
In the
College
city.
Pads it has a partnership with the university, and they'll continue to exist. Really what we're after is after college housing. So, anyone that's outside of a college age student, we want to kind of have them use this.
For our rental population, there would be both folks who are, in the college, attending college, and also non-renters, non-university affiliated. So I can imagine this site catering very much to the same population, and there being some type of confusion around what those two resources look like. Is there a reason that these might not be able to be merged in a community like ours where we have both populations?
So I think the University of Michigan site just does a really good job for students in particular. And there's things like they use their student login to get into the roommate and sublease page. It is a very different experience than if you're a non-student renter. For example, students find housing 6 months to 9 months in advance. So if you're faculty and staff or just a non-student in the city, finding housing is very different. And so if you go to that site, it's going to be very hard to use that, if not impossible to use it. So I know that's a huge part of the population here, but what we're after is, after college, for sure.
Okay. And then in terms of, yeah, I appreciate the question around accessibility. Another piece that we're trying to benchmark around eventually is green rental housing, and how that are those discussions that you've had at all yet with staff around how we might be able to integrate that data in?
Yeah, so just a tiny bit. And so things that we could do as a high-level idea is that we could put badges on those properties that meet those standards, or we could promote that any way you want to create an incentive for landlords to do it. So we think over 90% of renters will come through this platform in the city after college. And so we think it gives a lot of power to push things like that forward, to try to create an incentive for landlords to do that.
Okay, thanks.
All right.
Thank you so much for coming out and talking to us and reaching out to the city with the product. It looks like it'll be a great opportunity for people who rent in the city to find homes.
I think so, for sure.
So thank you so much.
All right, thank you all. Appreciate it.
Yep.
Good evening. Thank you for allowing me a few minutes this evening on behalf of the HR team to update you on some of the things that we've been doing over the last 6 to 7 months since I was able to come on board. It's been a great experience. The city's been very welcoming, and I think the experience that I've had is something I want to continue to have the HR team really expand and make sure there's a consistent experience for new employees that are coming in. So this evening, I wanted to talk a little bit about recognition of the HR team, what our recent focus has been, some of the foundation and key values that we see going forward, looking forward to 2025 and what we have planned this year, and then into 2026 and beyond, some of the trending challenges from an HR perspective specific to public sector, and then our commitment to the future. Here you'll see the current organizational chart for HR, and I think it's really important to note that the majority of the employees on our team have had a bit of a transition, we'll say that, over the last few years. And I think it's important to note that they've really held steady. They're very well knowledgeable in their subject matter, and they are very committed to making sure that the employees and candidates for different positions here are really supported, and we're looking at both the employee and the candidate experience. We have a number of people on the team that are relatively new, including myself. We have a new management assistant and a recently filled role of the Deputy Human Resources Director, which is a new role that Administrator Dohoney had encouraged some thought, and I think it's a really important role, particularly as we move forward over the next couple of years in terms of trying to make sure operationally within the department we're meeting our employees' needs of the HR team members, but then also allowing some connection with the organization and getting out into the organization. We have a few members that have been here through some difficult transitions. So Evelyn, Heather, Chelsea, Kim have been here for quite some time. Then we have some newer members, and I think that you'll see when you look at the way that we are currently structured, you have some tenured employees in the program area and you have some new employees. So that institutional knowledge is really important. And then some of the new ideas from employees that are new to the organization and new to HR have the ability to contribute. So over the prior 6 to 7 months, we really looked strongly at the current organizational structure within HR, looking at how we service the organization and the services that we provide. But looking at that structure, understanding that that's what's been used for quite some time, it appears, and whether or not we need to tweak that going forward. We did, just like I said, recently change to a management assistant role from an office manager role. We have the deputy, and we still have a current vacancy that we're looking at what's the best way to utilize that particular position and how we organize within. We've done a lot in terms of just learning new styles. There's about half the team is new, half the team has some tenure. And so just trying to make sure that we're developing relationships in a hybrid work environment, which can be challenging. And then really starting to do some knowledge sharing. Earlier I mentioned that there's a lot of institutional knowledge and subject matter knowledge in those key program areas. What we're finding is that we need to cross over and create less silos within HR in order to be able to support the organization more holistically. So the primary focus over the last 6 months has been very much internal to HR in terms of creating that team, getting some comfort, creating communication and team dynamics. A little less in terms of the organization externally, so that's going to be our focus over the next 6 months. But in addition to really focusing internally, there were a few key areas that HR had significant involvement in, and so we recently negotiated 2 contracts. You've seen both of those agreements come before you. We have a couple more pending, one including a brand-new contract with the district court employees, so that's a new initiative that really hasn't occurred in the organization for probably decades. From a recruitment standpoint, we recruited within HR, but we've also supported the organization in a key number of hires, including those that report to the administrator. And then open enrollment, which is just a normal operational activity that requires a ton of resources that generally the organization doesn't necessarily see. We handled that in the last 6 months as well. And I will say, based on close to 30 years of HR experience, it was one of the most efficient, well-run open enrollments that I've seen in terms of making sure that there are resources available and the ability to answer employee questions. And then the other piece that we've been significantly working on is the compensation study. So we had some initial work in the third quarter. We had to take a pause, and we're getting ready to re-energize and reorganize that particular study and kicking off some manager and supervisor engagement here in the next month. So that's really what the last 6 months has been focused on. Going forward, we're really encouraged, and we want to focus a lot on employee engagement. I think in the fall, when I was here just to introduce myself for the first time, I talked about that being a significant area of interest for me, and employee engagement being something more than employee satisfaction. If an employee is engaged, then they're engaged with their colleagues, they're engaged with the community, and it's more than just being, I'm satisfied that I have a job. We want to make sure that we're aligning with the organizational goals and council's goals as well. We want to make sure employees are supported, that we're looking at continuous improvement. We're really looking at basing our decisions on data and focusing some more on training and development. And the way in which we want to go about that is very much from an empathy perspective and making sure that we're meeting employees and candidates where they are and trying to do that in a way that also supports equity and inclusion as a very key value. And I'll say that our team has been working with Laura Orta and the organizational equity team and trying to look at some of the initiatives that council has passed in the past, and seeing what we can do to move those forward and make sure that that's a focus of everything that we do. And then we also want to be transparent when we communicate and be as honest and open and genuine as we possibly can. And of course, we want to be legally compliant, or Lean wants us to be. So using those foundations and the values going forward, what we expect over the next this year is really focusing on some process improvement and making sure that we're using the resources within HR as efficiently as we can so that we can expand some of the program areas. While doing process improvement, we want to make sure that we're aligned with service areas. And so we will start to get out into the organization here in the next couple months to really start to learn all of the operational needs and making sure that we can adjust operations or our guidelines or our support to make sure that there's consistency across the organization, but still value that each service area has different needs. And there's not one model that's going to fit every service area, but we want to be consistent where we can. Through cross-training, we want to develop that further. And then the specific projects in 2025, again, I just mentioned that we're going to kick off the re-engagement of the compensation study. We have AFSCME negotiations this year. That contract ends at the end of the year. It's one of our largest groups, and that is organization-wide. So some of the contracts that you've seen recently have been very department-specific. This will be an agreement that we look holistically across the organization and have to meet multiple needs in terms of moving a contract forward from that group. Recruitment and retention continues to be a focus. We've been able to reduce the number of open positions, but coming up with creative ways to meet candidate interest, the diversification of our applicant pools, and then ultimately who we hire. Another area that we see need for within the organization is supervisor and manager support programs. So as we look at how does an evolving workforce move from a COVID environment where it was primarily remote to the environment that we have now as being hybrid, making sure that we're continuing to give managers and supervisors the tools in terms of making sure that they know the needs of the employees that are different, that are on site versus remote, and how do we adjust accordingly for that. And then we also have needs assessments planned for 3 primary areas. Employee engagement, again, how do we engage the organization in a way that they're not only satisfied, but they're committed and they want to do exceptional work and engage within the community, whether that be through recognition programs, employee focus groups, different kinds of things to engage and allow us to push forward the values and the culture of the organization and the community. So employee engagement is a huge one. And then performance management, it's an area where the city has some opportunity in terms of trying to make sure that we're setting clear expectations and goals for employees and that they understand those up front. And then again, providing the manager support programs to make sure that they have the ability to communicate with employees about what those expectations are, and if there's a failure to meet those expectations, giving them the resources to be able to correct their behaviors and be successful. And then training and development. I think as a public sector employee, we have compensation and benefit challenges, and one of the areas where we can do there's a cost associated, but not a direct employee compensation cost. Where can we provide training and development opportunities that provide employees, particularly those that are running toward the top of their compensation scales, the ability to feel satisfied, have opportunities for growth, whether that be professionally or personally, that keep them here with the city. Beyond 2025, I think then we really need to start to look at compensation and benefits, particularly as we talk about fiscal responsibilities, and making sure that those are aligned as closely as we can with organizations that we're competing for talent with. And then we would look to implement those new initiatives that we were doing needs assessment on for this year. And then continuing to utilize technology. I think that there's a lot of areas that the HR team has identified that if we could streamline, that would allow us to be able to focus more on the employee interaction, the employee engagement piece, and making sure that we have the connection with service areas and employees. Some of the trending challenges across all HR industries, but also in the public sector, is promoting diversity and inclusion. We want to attract and retain the top talent, and competing with the University of Michigan or other local entities. How do we do that in a way that's fiscally responsible, that provides the opportunity for people to know that this is an employer of choice and it's a great place to work? And not only do we support them at work, but we want to make sure that they have a well-rounded work-life balance. Again, managing hybrid working models is going to be a challenge. And then prioritizing employee well-being and mental health in addition to the work-life balance, understanding that there's a lot of things that are going on politically, and how do we support employees in a way that it's a safe, supportive environment when they're at work, and then adapting to changing regulations and compliance. And in my opinion, one of the biggest challenges going forward is how do we use technology and still maintain the human aspect of that, and streamlining processes, but still making sure that we're there to listen to employees, be able to hear their concerns, be able to react to those, and making sure that they enjoy working here, because the more they're engaged and the more they enjoy their job, the better service they ultimately will provide to the community. So going forward, we have a strong commitment to customer service. It's really the key to everything that we want to do, whether that customer be the candidate or the employee, and making sure that their experience from start to finish is one that they can look back on and say that was an experience that I enjoyed, even if there's some challenges in it, but that if we're being compared to another organization, that one experience gives us the slight edge. And that's what, in combination with compensation and benefits, alignment with the market, will allow us to be that employer of choice. We want to make sure we continue to improve in everything that we do, and then making sure that we have inclusion, collaboration, and creativity as we move forward, and not doing the same things that we've always done just because we've done them that way, but really adjusting to the needs of the organization as we move forward. Thank you, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Given the current political climate, more so on the federal level, how do you see any challenges with the commitment to social justice, equity, and the elimination of discriminatory and prejudicial practices in hiring? I mean, do you see, how are you, going to continue, to align? Those are our values here at the City of Ann Arbor.
Yeah.
So,
absolutely. So one of the things that we've started to do is really look at the recruitment and hiring process and making sure that we're expanding our pool of candidates, different avenues, different organizations that we can partner with. And so really starting from when there's a vacancy, starting to work with that department to identify their needs, where are they looking to diversify, whether they have more tenured employees, newer employees, and that whole component of what are we missing and how do we add value. So starting with what are you looking for, how can you improve your team dynamics, starting with how we do that job description, where we post it, and then making sure that there's a process internally that we can de-identify to the extent possible. We do have some current limitations on our HRIS platform, but we have some paths forward that we've started to research in terms of other components that we can add and layer into that, so we'll work with IT on that. But really making sure that first focus from an IT or from an HR perspective has reduced as much bias as possible, and then looking to ensure that we have appropriate training with our managers and supervisors, using a consistent process across the city in terms of the style of recruiting, making sure that we're understanding differences in terms of how people engage in that recruitment process, and making sure that's as accessible as possible. And then from there, putting in some parameters or some evaluation of post-hire. How was that experience, and be able to learn from that. Right now, we're not gathering a lot of data in terms of, we do some exit interviews, but we're not really doing post-hire interviews in terms of getting information about their experience, or stay interviews. Why are you staying? Help us understand why you're staying so that we can promote that as a great place to work because of the values that we have as a city. So those are some of the things in the short term that we're looking at, primarily from a recruitment and hiring perspective. But we're also looking at all of our policies from an HR perspective and starting to review those on a regular basis, and making sure that we're touching on equity as a component of every review, and all types of equity in terms of what we look at.
Okay, thank you. I have a follow-up question to that, and this will fall under recruitment. In relation to policies, do you all see implementing the anonymous hiring initiative that City Council passed as a resolution back in March? Do you see, that happening? I don't know if you've done anything with it thus far, but do you see it, happening in 2025 or?
I anticipate we'll be able to make some movement in 2025. I think it'll always be a continuous improvement model in terms of being able to move in that direction. I've been able to partner with Laura Orta a bit, and based on my transition and the number of things that we've been trying to do, she's been very helpful in trying to help us move that forward. There are a lot of things on the fairness. You had two initiatives, right? You had the anonymous as well as the fair hiring.
Yes.
So there's a lot of things that were already in place for the fair hiring that might not have been communicated. So our first piece is we need to communicate to you what we are doing so that you have a comfort level there. And then Laura's going to be able to help kind of give us some parameters to start with, and then our team will be able to focus in on the HR specific piece of it. She and I have been working over the last 2 to 3 months just to kind of get that in queue, but I do anticipate we'll make some movement this year. The technology piece is a little bit of a challenge, but we're working on what we can do.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks for being here tonight and giving us an update. Great to hear all the things that are that you're working on, and kind of the desire to get folks aligned with our organizational goals, which I know they are, depending on where you're at in the organization. But we know that folks that work for the city are mission-driven, and it's not an easy time to be working in public service, and it's the messages out there are not. I think we want to really recognize and appreciate the folks that have chosen this career path. And so one of the things that I was also glad to hear you say is emphasis on recognition, and I'd love to be able to see us more easily provide accolades to folks who are, for folks, residents, to be able to provide positive comments back when they have a good interaction. I think sometimes folks reach out when something is making them feel less than happy, but I want to make it just as easy for them to be able to reach out when they notice something good.
There is quite a bit of work being done in that area. Again, Laura Order is one of our champions in that area. She's been working with the executive team to create a compliment complaint kind of avenue in order to be able to get frustrations expressed, but also we didn't want to just leave it out there as just frustrations. We wanted to make sure there was an opportunity for positive feedback as well, and then how do we incorporate that? And the administrator does a nice job in terms of a relatively new program, I think, where there's quarterly review of different employees and a model there. But so we want to grow and continue on that.
Thank you, and thank you for sharing your report tonight. It's really helpful information. I wanted to know about the implementation of the 2024 ordinance City Council passed of the Ban the Box initiative, where it prohibits city contractors from asking applicants about their criminal history until prior to making a conditional job offer. And I'm wondering, could that also be affected by some of the federal changes that we see?
So I think one of the things in the last 6 to 7 months is there has been a lot of focus on maintaining as much confidentiality and sensitivity around somebody's background until as late in the process as possible. We've done a lot of that, particularly in the police department, and so changing the way in which we do the process and where we ask those questions. They used to be asked in panel interviews, and so somebody that might be a colleague of mine eventually might have had exposure to my answers about something that really they're not part of that part of the decision. So we've removed it from a particular part in the process. We've retained it, and we've just moved it into a different area to ensure that the information's collected, and from a background perspective that we can review it. But we're really trying to make sure that all of that sensitive information is very much post-offer, and that it's relative to the position that they're in. And, we look at the scope of perhaps a background, the severity of what might be on it, and is it even relevant to the job that they're doing? And so we've really reduced the number of people that have access to that information, but we've ensured that there are still natural connection points so that different people have, myself, for example, the chief might have access to a part of it, an HR person might have access to a part of it, I have access to both of it, so that if I see a discrepancy, then we can bring it up and have a conversation. So we've really limited the number of people that have access to that information. But I'll take that back as an initiative to continue to work on.
Any other questions?
Thank you.
Thank you for coming on out. Everything we do at the City of Ann Arbor is performed by staff. And staff does great work up and down the line, and I am just so grateful for the quality of life that they enabled our community to attain. And it's crucial that we have a quality workplace to match it. So thank you so much.
There's such kind words, and I haven't even said anything, Mayor.
You doubly so.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Thank you for the opportunity to check in with you about the comprehensive plan. The project is ongoing, but this is an important milestone in the process. We're shifting from engagement to actually producing the document. And because of that, the time was really ripe for us to share with you a couple of direction points that we have recently garnered from our Planning Commission. Because we're shifting into this mode, we wanted some clarity on some issues relative to that. They are around housing, employment and tax base, and infrastructure. And wanted to share with you a couple of those directions that we've recently received from the Planning Commission. Honestly, they are distinct in some ways from what I was envisioning, but that's why I'm not the one responsible for drafting this plan in isolation. So in a moment, Senior Planner Michelle Bennett is going to share with you an overview of those, and then we'll address any questions. I would say it's a really exciting time for us to be doing this comprehensive plan. It's a really exciting time for us to be laying out our vision for the city in the future, but it's not without challenges. With us laying out that vision for the future, we're going to have to be really mindful. We have some really significant steps in addition to just sort of drawing a map as to how we're going to cultivate and support the type of community we want to evolve into. And it's an exciting time because we're starting to answer some of those questions as it relates to infrastructure in a variety of ways. You're going to hear a little bit about solid waste here later this evening. So we have a lot to think about how we grow our city, but it's an exciting time for us to at least put forth the vision for where we want to get to. But I want to be clear and honest that it's going to be a lot of hard work ahead and a lot of resource decisions that we're going to make in order to achieve those visions that we're going to lay out in the comprehensive plan. Just as a reminder, the Planning Commission drafts the plan, they approve it, and then they deliver it to you for approval or rejection. And then only at that point does it form the basis for our land use policy going forward. As a reminder, once that comprehensive plan is drafted, nothing changes. It's our to-work list, it's our goal, it's our to-do list, and then we have to get to work implementing that plan. So that's really important to keep in mind as well. So like I said, we're going to have, Michelle is going to give you an overview of some of those important questions that we posed and the direction we've received from the Planning Commission in that regard to share with you and of course the public, and then we're happy to answer any questions that you have after that.
Do I switch here?
You can probably use those or the mouse, whatever you prefer.
Okay. Good evening, Council. Let me start by orienting you where we are in this process. February 2025, we plan after this evening to start drafting this plan. I'm going to send it off to our consultants and hope that in the next 6 weeks or so, we will have a draft to share. You can see that right here on our timeline here that we hope to have the plan adopted in November of 2025. And in about a month, we may or may not be coming back to ask for a little bit more time and a little bit more money to complete this plan. You can also see here that we've been very heavy on engagement for the first year of this process, and there are some highlights here as to how we reached out to the community and how many people attended our events and shared their input. All right, let's get right into it with low-rise residential. So this is our future land use map where just the proposed low-rise residential is this light yellow color here. So that currently covers exactly the same geography as our R1 and R2 zones, and that's about 36% of the city's land. In our conversations with the community, maybe you attended in March and October, we had some sessions at the library. We provided some visuals to show the community what we mean by densifying this proposed land use. One of our directives from City Council was to find ways to increase housing supply and densify our R1 and R2. So we went to the community and we showed them images of what it would look like, because densifying means different things to different people. Some might be imagining just a couple extra units per acre, and some are imagining, 10 stories right next to them. So in doing so, we got quite a bit of positive feedback, a lot of support for about 4 units per parcel. I think about 70% or so of those who attended our sessions supported that level of density. In the last few months, in conversations with the subcommittee, the Planning Commission subcommittee, They raised the question of, do we really need to limit that? If it is so difficult to find housing in Ann Arbor, is there any way that we could increase density even further? And so they have asked, or the direction that they've provided for us is up to 4 stories, that we don't seek to necessarily limit by number of units, but more so by form. And so most people's perspective is that they care more about the scale and how it fits into their neighborhood than necessarily how many units there are. So that is the current direction that we are taking from Planning Commission on low-rise residential. There are still some things to consider, though, and these are the images you can see here at the bottom that we showed the public. So up to triplex and quadplex was the most popular. This does provide more opportunity for larger scale development in the city. However, as we learn more and more through some of the other studies that are being done with sanitary sewer and water, that there may be some utility infrastructure challenges with larger development in these neighborhoods. The other thing to consider is that, like I said, our conversations were based on 4 units per parcel, and so going denser than that would be a departure from what we discussed with the public. Okay, mixed-use hubs. So originally, the future land use map proposed 1 mixed-use hub. In more conversations with our consultants, we thought that it would make sense to break it down into 3 distinct mixed-use hubs. They do all still share a common goal of becoming walkable mixed-use places, and they also all would provide the highest heights and the greatest density. But I'll walk you through a bit of the distinctions here. At State and Eisenhower, as you can see here, this is the Briarwood footprint. This would be thought to be another core, like a downtown in the southern part of the city. The innovation area on Plymouth Road up near North Campus would be thought to be more focused on certain types of land uses that would be spin-offs from U of M's new investment model, which I'll talk a little bit more about. And then our retail hubs here, this I believe is Arborland on Washtenaw. I'm thinking about how to reimagine those because currently they're not anyone's favorite format, and what can we do to make them denser and more urban. Okay, so this map is meant to show these 3 mixed-use hubs in relation to the TC1 zoning. The black outline here is the TC1 zoning. So you can see in some areas up here in the north on Plymouth, we've actually proposed to substantially expand the innovation zone greater than TC1 up there. We've also done that here down near Briarwood, and even in some areas where we would propose expanding the downtown. Okay, I'll start with the core district because I do think in general there is some consensus around that this area is ripe for redevelopment. There is a large footprint here, larger parcels surrounding it, and a lot of parking lot to work with. However, in this part of the city is one of the most infrastructure constrained in terms of utilities, and also this reoccurring question that if we are to start adding residential to these areas that previously don't have them, are we fulfilling our goal here of these 15-minute neighborhoods? Do we have the parks, the transit, all the other infrastructure needed to support that? Okay, the Innovation District, again, up on Plymouth near North Campus. Originally, this was proposed to have limited residential use. Principally, it would be, again, some of these kind of biotech type uses that U of M is investing in to provide some space for potential spin-offs from U of M's investment. And the reason we propose limited residential is that the market for that is so strong. There is a concern that if we were to allow it unregulated, that is what would be built. It would crowd out any other type of use that could be built there. So let me talk a little bit about why we propose this zone. U of M has recently changed how they are investing in innovation. In 2024, they had 28 startups launched, over $500 million in venture capital raised. Now, most of those investments will be happening on campus, and we do understand that. However, if any of them were to be successful enough to scale up, do we have room in the city to house them, or would they have to leave? So this is an important consideration and thought that the planning team has had of, do we want to allot land for these types of uses and allow limited residential to support them? The retail districts. So again, we're thinking here about Arborland, Maple Village, Westgate. These areas, these retail areas are sort of on the fringe of the city near highway interchanges. So they are very car-centric. They have large parking lots. Like I mentioned, they are no one's desired format. And the goal would be to transition them over time into walkable mixed-use hubs. There was just a slight difference in how to do that. And so staff had proposed relaxing some of the form-based standards so that we could have a more incremental approach. So think of outlots in those parking lots, for example. Planning Commission wanted a more complete sort of overhaul of redevelopment. When we explained to them that, in order to transition these areas, it's going to take a long time, and that a lot of these stores or these businesses have signed 20 to 30 to 40-year-long leases. So someone would have to come in, buy all of those leases out, potentially demolish those buildings, potentially upsize their infrastructure before they could even start to redevelop, that this is going to delay the process quite a bit. And so that is something to consider. But they were pretty steadfast in not wanting to relax any of the standards, so that we wouldn't kind of incrementally grow in those areas, that there is a hope that it will be taken care of all at once. Okay, and the employment district. The employment district is on South Industrial and the Research Park. There's a map on the next slide that I'll show you that. But the idea behind this is that we want to preserve some space in the city for these types of uses. They are industrial in nature, not maybe in the traditional sense of people thinking of really noxious uses that would be terrible to live next to, but they are still and have been on an industrial corridor for many years. So the idea with preserving that is to help preserve a diversity of jobs, that not every job here is related to the university, that there are jobs here that you do need to be in person that are manual labor, and that there should be places preserved for that in the city. There has been some pushback here that we need housing, and that right now the city currently provides 94% of our land permits residential. Our future land use map would propose 98, but the Planning Commission wants there to be housing permitted in 100% of the city, which would mean on this corridor as well. So we did actually reduce this area from 728 acres to 384. But you can see here, like I mentioned, South Industrial and Research Park is an area that the Planning Commission thinks would be suitable for residential. And that is probably one area where staff and Planning Commission diverge. We've also talked to the Office of Sustainability and Innovation about this. The employment district would, if it were to remain as proposed, allow and support the circular economy. It would allow some of the uses that we don't currently have, but that if we really want to support the circular economy would need. So for example, if we are going to have, if we're going to recycle, after we have demolished a building, we're going to need a space where we can sort through all of that. And that might not be a place someone wants to live next to. We also have a lot of public infrastructure constraints in this part of the city, so that is something else we need to consider if we're going to have high-density housing there. And like I mentioned before, is this really, even if we could have housing there, someplace that is going to be well serviced by transit, by parks, any type of recreation, or is it just a place where we can build now without thinking about the ramifications for 2050? So those are all the key points that we've brought up with the Planning Commission, and that we're happy to share with you. Brett's going to come back up and help answer any questions that you may have. And hopefully we have Jamie on the line and Stacy.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. And first and foremost, thank you for all the work that everyone is putting in on this. It's a massive undertaking. Going back to the R1, R2 districts, I understand that 3 stories and quadplex, up to a quadplex, received a lot of support, 70-some%. Were the notions of 4 stories, 48 feet, or unlimited numbers of units discussed with residents in those sessions? And if so, what was the level of support?
Yeah, they weren't discussed explicitly. As Michelle indicated, when we started this conversation, we started with a lot of the council direction that it was, one of the directions was increasing housing density in all areas of the city, including single-family neighborhoods. And pretty quickly we found, as Michelle indicated, that densifying means very different things to people when they hear that word and how they picture it. Some picture it welcoming, some picture it with fear. And so pretty quickly we started following a lot of national trends too. There's been a lot of other communities that have thought in that scale of about 4 units in formerly single-family neighborhoods. So we started using that as a way to illustrate, no, we're not talking about unlimited density everywhere. So we did talk about that. We didn't explicitly talk about 4 stories and unlimited. I would say the nuance of that would be in the context of, we did hear a lot of feedback for increasing density in areas of the city. I don't know in the spaces of a lot of support for expanding downtown, a lot of support for expanding housing along our corridors. I'm sure that there's some built into that overwhelming positive feedback of, yeah, some component of, I don't care about the number of units. But in short, no, we didn't explicitly bring that typology to single and 2-family neighborhoods that exist currently in the city.
Okay, all right. To me, it's a concern. It's a big concern to depart from what was told to residents in those engagement sessions. So,
and
yeah.
If I could just add, but I think, I don't want to speak for the Planning Commission, of course, but I think they were recognizing the importance of the scalability to be important, and I think that was as much of it, and gave us the direction to look at that as, I don't think that they were, I didn't take it as anything goes by any stretch in those neighborhoods, but it was a question that whether or not the number of units was the right way to do that scale. So, and I don't sit here knowing what that recommendation will be, but I think the comp plan is going to attempt to define or identify the need to figure out what that form-based scale is to sort of get to some of those concerns, because certainly even with that, I'm sure that there are some that were like, I thought you said 4 units and that's it. I think that there's probably another category of people who are more interested in what the scalability of it is and aren't so important whether that's 3 units or 4 units or 6 units. So I don't want that to go unsaid. I think that there was a recognition that there needs to be a scalability, and that's something we think we can find in the comprehensive plan to present that vision.
Mm-hmm. Okay, good. Thank you.
Councilmember Radina.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you for the presentation. Acknowledging our need for more housing, which was driving this conversation, but also our desire to be a city that is encouraging of innovation and diverse businesses and startups and things like that. I guess can you talk a little bit more about why? I think I heard you mention in like the innovation zone, there would be restriction on residential. Can you talk a little bit more about why that recommendation exists, why that's necessary, and what that actually kind of means for a zone like that?
Go ahead.
I can start. Because there's so much pent-up demand for housing, the fear is that if we don't limit the amount in that zone, that it could completely take over. So if it is mixed use in that it allows for these biotech companies and residential, there is a concern that it could all become residential because the demand for that is so high while we're waiting for these sort of startups to scale up. As to exactly how we regulate that, we've touched on that a little bit with some case studies. I don't know if they're restricted by square footage or percentage of the land, but there are some mechanisms for doing that that are available.
Yeah, and I would just add that it's a market pressure. When our presumption is that when residential market pressure is pitted up against maybe innovation space, employment zones, you saw pictures of a thrift store, of a coffee shop. When given those pressures coming to those sites, the residential market pressure probably carries a bigger stick. And so without a regulatory framework that either prohibits or limits the ability of that market stick to impact and potentially displace those uses, that was the formation for us considering limiting residential in the innovation zone and prohibiting it in the employment zone. So that's explicitly where the basis comes from. Planning Commission, like you said, housing, I think is what I heard from them is that is job one, and it's more important and elevated than these other ideals.
Okay. And then can you also, I think I heard you mention infrastructure needs and challenges. Can you go into that a little bit more and how that might impact the outcome of the plan?
Yeah. Like I said, it's an exciting time. We're still, I don't come to you here with definitive answers in that regard. You're people in the room that have a better sense of that, but we are starting to answer some of those questions. We're starting to answer some of the very specific questions about things like sanitary sewer, stormwater, water. All of those are those analyses come based on principles, right? They come based on projections on how many people, what is our use now and what is our projected use. And so the impact of those studies is going to, I would say, impact the implementation rate of our vision in this comprehensive plan. At an extreme example, if we put some zone on that map that says we think that this is a high potential for densification and growth and a full diversity of uses, but simultaneously we find out that there are infrastructure needs that are going to be barriers to realizing the development at that geography or that scale, it's going to be really important that we communicate in that plan that we have to answer those questions and facilitate that supply before we flip the switch to allow those land uses to come in place to get implemented. The comp plan is the appropriate place to identify that as our goal, but it's also the appropriate place to lay out the very deliberate way in which we're going to have to implement in order to get to that goal. So in short, I think it's going to impact our ability to move quickly or more slowly with the right infrastructure and prioritization to make sure that we're not getting too far ahead of the following projects that respond to the changes that we put into place.
Thank you.
Councilmember Gaziano.
Thank you, and thank you for this presentation. This is similar to Councilmember Redina's question. It's in regards to creating residential zones and industrial zoning, so I believe it's M1 and M2. I wanted to know from all of you, in terms of the cost to get that ready, I mean, you talked a little bit about utility infrastructure. Currently, are those areas, for example, safe in terms of environmental toxins or even noise? Are they inhabitable for residential units? And if not, do you guys kind of take that into consideration in terms of the cost to get an area ready?
So generally, when we're thinking about from a conflict perspective, so generally, we and a lot of communities have gone too far to segregate land uses. I stand here before you believing that. Part of the reason I say that is because we actually have a lot of nuisance protections that are pretty equally distributed regardless of land use or geography across the city. I think one of the things that we'll have to think about is as we lean into more mixed uses in a greater sense of the word, it's one thing to say commercial and residential, but then if we start doing material sorting facilities and residentials, we might have to reconcile some of those because it might be more challenging to meet all of those nuisance requirements. So I see that as answerable. As it relates to toxins and the like, it's hard to paint that with a broad brush. That's really so site specific. It is possible that there could be a historic use that really limits the viability of a site being converted to residential. I wouldn't hazard a guess, but I wouldn't think it's the majority of the area that we're proposing here. And we have a lot of economic development tools here in the state that we can take as far as possible to try and solve those answers. So it's possible that there could be some sort of environmental factors that are a limiting factor. It's hard for me to project that would be widespread. Part of that is because we haven't had a history of really heavy manufacturing here that some other communities have had.
Councilmember Riggs.
Thank you. Appreciate it's exciting to hear about the comprehensive planning process, always. A few comments regarding the low-rise district, similar to Councilmember Iyer. I think that I share some concerns that we've had conversations with the community, received some feedback there, and seem to be heading potentially a different direction. I think the feedback that you received seems very consistent with what I've heard from residents around a comfort with gentle growth and density within the neighborhoods. And I would concur with Planning Commission that folks probably tend to care more about form and less concern about the number of units. But I think where that I would differ is I think there's a real difference between 4 stories and maybe what was presented within those conversations. And before we would head that direction, I would think that if we were, we'd probably need to get some more community feedback around that. And I'm not sure we want. Let's revisit going back to the beginning of the process. So I know we have a timeline here. Around the conversations around mixed-use hubs, I think we've socialized the community a lot around the concept of TC1, and I can understand that we're learning things as a community and as planning staff about what's working, what's not. One of the priorities that I think that we share is that we want to see infill happen in ways that's not continuing sort of a land use form that we don't seem to see to be very healthy, strip mall type development. And so I would be uncomfortable with us moving away from that if there's modifications that, allow redevelopment to happen in terms of, infill with greater density and more flexibility in terms of mixed use. I would be comfortable with that. I think folks on the west side of town, the 5th Ward, are really, they see this as a really great place to live because there are so many services there. And so I think we want to try to fill in that space with additional good use. Now, I'm remembering correctly that the city needs to update its land use plan. It's required by law every 5 years. Is that correct?
It's required to review every 5 years.
That's a good point. Thank you. Thanks for that. And I think I'm wondering if there are opportunities for us to be thinking about that 5-year process, 5-year mark, in ways of integrating some of this feedback that we're continuing to receive if the infrastructure is not, appropriate yet in certain areas to be able to support additional growth. But we know that the community consensus is that we need more housing. How do we fill that in and not just continue to rubber stamp our plan for the next 30 years, kind of like, So I don't know if you've thought about some different markers that might be able to help us as we get to those points.
I do think as part of implementation, we are hoping to have certain metrics that we continue to track, and that even though every 5 years it's required by law, that we would be having, an annual report to talk about our progress, and that this remains a living document, and that we can just monitor our progress. And things are going to shift and change, right, before 2050, and so we just have to stay somewhat nimble and on top of that.
Councilmember Malik.
Thank you guys so much for this. I think you're exactly right in stating, that this is a big change for the city in a big way, but also in a very positive way. Updating our comprehensive plan is no small feat, so thank you so much for your work on this. My question is kind of along the lines of what my Ward 3 colleagues asked. In the areas of proposed limitation for housing, the mixed-use hubs, the innovation and employment zones, thank you. Is it possible to allow housing now and then potentially limit it later if it does appear that housing is overwhelming these other uses as predicted, if it actually materializes? It's my understanding that no housing has been built yet under the new TC1 zones, for instance. So we haven't seen that housing demand, break through in those areas. Why do we necessarily assume that for these new areas? I mean, I know they're not the same, but, and I guess that then is that a question of, do we have to have this one shot at the comprehensive plan, or is it something we can tweak years down the line if things don't quite pan out as planned? So I guess that's my question.
The short answer is yes. We could make a land use decision that's more inclusive now and then reconsider it at some point in the future. I think I would just share that it's not impossible, but it's harder to go back than it is forward. Just practically speaking, think about nonconformities, like, zoning is perspective. So when we make a change, we don't require everybody who's done something in the past to change it. But in the event we, for example, established allowed housing in the manufacturing zones that we don't allow today, and development happened there, and then we change our mind, we would be rendering those properties non-conforming, so that's going to provide some limitations on there. So it's not impossible, but it's more challenging than going the other direction. I just want to be clear, though, we are, part of the goal here is to be very transparent with you. Based on our direction from the Planning Commission, there is no limitation in those zones. We just wanted to be forthright about some of the things that we were thinking about. These are facets of the recommendation and the plan. We wanted to share that with, of course, the Planning Commission, because it's their plan to draft, but we also wanted to share it with you because ultimately it's going to land on your desk too. So I do want to be clear that we were sharing some of our recommendations in regards to the employment zone and the innovation zones. In the former was to prohibit residential, the latter was to limit it. But based on the direction from Planning Commission, we anticipate seeking the opportunity for residential in all of those. But I do want to emphasize that we will have to be really thoughtful about making sure that the timing of when we implement that goal, I think it's easy for it to articulate the vision in the plan. We got to make sure that we're going to be able to support those buildings. And the reason, I think maybe your last question that is, why do we think it might happen there versus other places? The other areas have been open to residential and commercial for some time. And it's not to say that I'm no real estate professional, but I think part of the reason that an area like South Industrial is really attractive is because the cost and the valuation of those buildings might be less than they are in Washtenaw, or might be less than they are in Plymouth. And so that's why I think there might be an increased chance for one of the uses or those sites to be realized as residential development, maybe at a different pace because of the economics of it.
Thank you.
Councilmember Cornell?
I'm going to echo my colleagues' appreciation for the hard work. And Councilmember Malik actually asked one of my questions, so I think I'll be quick. You mentioned in, excuse me, the employment zone that you were reducing acres zone for industrial from 728 to 384. And what was that rezoned to as part of the new comprehensive plan? Is that for housing? What is the intended purpose
The
of that
northern part
reduction?
of South Industrial?
So what's the future land use map for those areas?
Right. I'd have to look at the map.
Yeah, I think some of it is corridor residential, like along Huron to the north of downtown. Similarly along State, South State. Yeah, I'd have to follow up with the detailed map, but yeah, we did a good job telling you what's no longer manufacturing, what it is. But all of those zones would allow housing, whatever they are.
Councilmember Adina?
Thank you. This is maybe just a follow-up on my question from before, and, housing, obviously, again, driving this conversation was our demand for housing, and I think, I am also hearing from you kind of some of the market pressure that may exist on some of these properties if they're rezoned to allow kind of either residential or a ruse roast, right? And so how much the value of that property goes up if suddenly you can put X number of units on it, as opposed to just the thrift shop or the coffee shop. And so I guess acknowledging that those businesses contribute to kind of the things that everyone loves about Ann Arbor, and trying to balance that with our housing demand. I guess in the current plans, if there are these areas that have some restrictions on residential use, what percentage of the city would have a residential purpose? What is the percentage that we're talking about restricting?
Okay, so currently 94% of the city permits residential. We are proposing 98%, so it's just that employment zone, that's 2% of land that would not allow housing, or at least that's what we proposed. And so Planning Commission wants it to be 100%. With that 98% though, we have upzoned quite a bit, so we have projected that it would be between 30 to 97,000 units over potentially. That's what would be enabled, not guaranteed what would come. That is what would be enabled up through 2050, which is a significant increase in housing per year from what we see now. And to put into perspective, 97,000 would be more than what New York City is currently trying to enable. I think there's around 80,000.
And you mentioned the thrift shop, and I just want to share an anecdote and some conversation that happened at the Planning Commission. That was raised as an example of how great would it be to add a bunch of housing there to add to the viability of that business, right? And absolutely, rooftops brings commercial support, but you don't get that without the risk to that building. And so, but to be clear, we're following Planning Commission direction at this point. There are infrastructure questions that I think will honestly have to be addressed very clearly in the plan, because we don't want to convey to the public, this is our vision, this is our zone. Oh, sorry, it turns out we have to fix this pipe before we can say yes. So we got to be very careful about that. But I think that's part of the tension. I think, yes, development next door to that that's great for the thrift shop. Development on the thrift shop property, that thrift shop probably doesn't relocate in the city. So.
Thank you.
Councilmember Briggs.
Thanks. Can you talk a little bit more just about process moving forward? I know you started the presentation with that, but kind of keep coming back to the piece around, Planning Commission drafting this and, and then it'll come to council and some of the Planning Commission recommendations. I think you're hearing some things tonight that might differ a little bit from, some is in, some agreement, some differences there. How do you anticipate incorporating additional feedback that you might receive here and other places into that draft plan? And then because my understanding is that when this plan comes to council, the hope is that it's sort of a yes/no vote, not a.
Magic words. So some of the tensions here, whether you're talking about low-rise residential, how residential is integrated, part of that is me and the project team blurring the line between zoning and comprehensive plan. And so there are a lot of opinions, and we've received a lot of opinions from all the engagement that you're seeing there. We're making some generalizations. 70% of people supported. There's a lot of diversity of opinion in the city. And so I think that we are going to try to use the comprehensive plan to faithfully recognize the direction that we have and some of the questions we have. And honestly, and what that means at times is the comp plan might not answer as many of the questions and leave some of it to implementation. And so, we're going to do our best to deliver a product to you and the public and the Planning Commission that we're going to share widely. We're going to solicit feedback on it. And then we're going to go through that adoption process as you articulate. The Planning Commission ultimately is going to adopt it, present it to you. You're going to have the opportunity then to say, yep, let's share this with our neighbors and the public for sort of final comment. And then at the conclusion of that period, it's going to go through its final adoption. And so I'm going to work with people smarter than me to find the way to incorporate and address, honestly, whether it's an infrastructure challenge, the right scale of development in low-density residential, to hopefully convey a vision that everybody's in agreement with. And then we're going to have some hard work on the implementation side of it. And so, so the plan's going to hopefully describe an endpoint, but it might not be with the specificity that says buildings here shall be 35 feet or buildings here shall be 48 feet, but describe faithfully what we've heard, and then we're going to have to go to work to figure out what that looks like in the code. Does that help?
It does.
Further questions? For my part, I just want to, of course, thank you all for the work that you've done on this project and those you represent or embody. I'd like to thank Planning Commission, who's done a great deal of work on this and has pretty consistently heard this council's and heard the community's voice that, that we do have a housing crisis. Similar, along those lines, but although, for my part, I am, 2 feet in on the housing crisis and the need to address. It is also, one of the challenges that we have in the city, and so I want to, contain that duality. Diversity of use, diversity of is important, and the businesses that we have on South Industrial and their nature. Without regard to their individual merits, the nature of those businesses is important to a community that has a diversity of use, has a diversity of employment. Similarly, the university does have great plans and resources with respect to what's going on North Campus. And the spinoff of that is unknown to us, but can perhaps be anticipated, and a community augmented by understanding that spinoff. And further and finally, for my part, I'd like to echo some of the some of the cautions that I've heard from colleagues with respect to the community consensus that I think we've heard through the engagement process, and wanting to make sure that know that we have a plan that can accomplish that consensus on the input and hopefully on the output, because that's a common goal. We have challenges, and we need to all be in on them in order to meet them.
Amen.
Thanks.
Thank you very much.
You bet. It is now 8:30. Or Mr. Dohoney, do you have words of wisdom for us one way or the other? I don't. When you stand up, I'm quiet, so you know.
I'm not Charlton Heston, so I don't know if it's wise or not. We won't be finished in 15 minutes with solid waste. I know there's a cutoff for public input, so do you want us to start, or what do you want us to do?
That was what I was going to posit. Perhaps we can hear the presentation, pause for public comment if public comment there be, and then have questions that run around the table as we wish. And then when the natural course of those questions is done, so too will our time together.
Okay.
All right.
Good evening, and thank you for having us. We're excited for the opportunity to share with you the work that we do in solid waste. I know everybody's excited to hear about trash. While I have exchanged emails with many of you, most of us have not met in person. My name is Allison Heatley, and I am your solid waste manager. Here with me tonight are Sarah Mason, our Resource Recovery Manager, Sky Stewart, Public Services Chief of Staff, and Jordan Roberts, our Public Services Area Administrator. Kevin Schneider, our Crew Supervisor, was not able to be with us tonight. During tonight's presentation, we will discuss our overarching service goals, provide a unit overview that includes operations, programs, and equipment, and share our current challenges and upcoming Horizon issues. Our overarching goal in solid waste is to provide safe and efficient solid waste services, as well as provide opportunities for landfill diversion for residents and businesses in Ann Arbor to protect public health and the environment. When we say safe, we mean safety of not just our operators, but everyone around us. When we say efficient, we mean how are we going to cost-effectively service routes while minimizing disruption for customers and reducing conflicts with other motorists, cyclists, and pedestrians whenever and wherever possible. We address waste reduction by providing education and alternatives for waste diversion through various programs and services. Solid waste is a unit of the public services area. It oversees the collection of trash, organics, and recyclable materials in the city. We're primarily funded through the solid waste millage, with some contributions from the climate action millage. Solid waste is one of the most important activities provided by municipalities. We are the only city service that every resident and business interacts with in some way each week, and it can often go unnoticed unless something goes wrong. We're made up of 20 drivers, 1 crew supervisor, 3 program staff, 1 unit manager, and a handful of temporary staff. Our current fleet consists of 15 owned city trucks, 1 long-term rental, servicing 95 unique collection routes each week. Just counting city resources, solid waste staff make more than 1.5 million house calls each year. Our equipment includes automated sidearm loaders, which you're probably the most familiar with. This is used for residential trash and organics cart collection. Front loaders, used for larger trash and recycling dumpsters. And rear loaders, which can service carts and smaller dumpsters and are primarily used in our downtown. Each of these trucks have a specific purpose and for the most part are not interchangeable. Not all these truck types operate in all areas of the city. And our goal is to plan routes for each truck type to service all customers as efficiently as possible. Because operations are reliant on staff and equipment every single day, and waste collection is a core service that cannot usually be rescheduled, it is essential that we have enough trucks and enough staff each day to complete the work. And often that means we have to be flexible and nimble in our deployment. Throughout most of the year, every truck in the fleet is in use at least 5 days a week. Our front-load trucks are heavily utilized, sometimes 10 to 12 hours a day. We expect to add a new front-load truck and a spare automated truck sometime this year to help better manage our existing routes. And when trucks go down for long periods, we utilize rental trucks to get the work done. When a truck goes out of service, the routes still need to be completed. Our drivers must be flexible, whether it's working overtime to complete the routes or driving different equipment throughout the day. We're fortunate to have experienced staff who can be nimble and provide coverage when we're short on staff or on equipment. Seasonal peaks have also been a challenge. Past leaf seasons have resulted in long days, leading to injuries, significant OT, and temporary burnout. Implementing our recent bag set-out limits and hiring seasonal staff have helped to mitigate these issues. And staffing is always an issue. It seems we're always hiring, and the CDL requirement can be an obstacle.
Good evening. Thank you so much for the opportunity to be here. I'm Sarah Mason, your Resource Recovery Manager. Allison has given you all a good overview of the direct services we provide with city trucks and crews. The unit is also responsible for contract administration for all solid waste-related services. These contracts include operations for our solid waste facilities, such as the city-owned transfer station, where trash is taken to be consolidated before transferred to the landfill for disposal, the city's compost facility, and the leased material recovery facility. We also manage contracts for education and outreach that supports all of our programs and encourages waste reduction. We also have contracts for additional collection services, such as our commercial refuse contract with WM and curbside recycle collections with Recycling Arbor. Our program staff, who I'm, by the way, very proud to work with, are extremely dedicated to daily problem solving and resolution finding for the residents and businesses of Ann Arbor. They work to provide support for our operations and new programs to meet our waste reduction and circular economy goals. Our team works closely with both internal and external partners, such as city communications, sustainability, community standards, the county, the university, DDA, downtown business districts, to achieve the goals outlined in the Solid Waste Resource Management Plan approved by Council and the A20 Climate Action Plan around reducing overall waste generated and then managing what waste is produced in the most responsible method available. Downtown is an area where there are specific and unique challenges to providing solid waste services due to limited space for containers, the need for many shared containers, and then just the general amount of traffic in terms of pedestrians, cyclists, motorists, and as the day gets busier, it gets much harder to get in and out. So as I mentioned previously, we've worked very hard to be responsive to concerns and needs of our customers, and as downtown is a focal point for the city, it's been an area where we've made some concentrated changes and increased services to meet the demand. Over the past 2 years, we've increased trash collection to 7 days a week, thereby eliminating the long gap between, say, a busy Saturday and a Monday morning collection. We've also increased recycling collection to 6 days a week. We have done many in-person meetings, bringing all the customers together, property owners, to try and resolve issues around shared containers. Sometimes that involves the frequency, the schedule, access, and just general responsibility for cleaning up the area. Staff work closely with community standards to do inspections and then follow up with customers when there's issues to try and get them resolved. We've relocated containers as necessary, and then we've worked to improve the efficiency of collection by reducing just the number of containers that you see, by transitioning some of the recycle carts to smaller 2-yard dumpsters. This helps also make room for future services as we look to add, say, commercial compost collection in the future. And then finally, we worked with WM, our franchise hauler, for commercial customers to make sure that customers were paying for their appropriate service to establish greater accountability. In addition to some of the unique challenges I mentioned in downtown, we also want to spend some time discussing a few areas where we encounter challenges to what we do throughout the city. These areas broadly include meeting the demand for new and expanded services as more customers come online, volumes increase, and we expand services to meet our goals. This also includes thinking about how we modify our services as there's changing road configurations across the city. As we add bicycle infrastructure, as we change the type and amount of development we have to modify and be flexible to be responsive to that. This includes how we provide service and how we communicate those services to our customers. In addition, we look for how we can continue to provide safe and efficient collection as we grow and densify into the future. I'll speak briefly about the demand for new and expanded services. The things that you see listed here, the demand for increased frequency in recycling for commercial and multifamily organics collection and bulk waste were all things that were in the Solid Waste Resource Management Plan. And they are opportunities for growth in our services. When we think about the demand for increased frequency of service, a good example is needing to increase service for recycling collection. We have a lot of commercial customers that we see that could utilize more capacity, in large part because they have a larger amount of cardboard generated that often doesn't get broken down appropriately, and it leads to an overflowing dumpster. So we've been exploring the option of maybe we could install compactors in some places instead to better recover that good, clean cardboard for recycling. Food scrap collection is something that's long been available to our single-family residents. They can put it in their compost cart at the curb. However, at present, it's not really available for multifamily residents in a very convenient way. So we've been working in partnership with OSI to establish a network for food scrap drop-off locations that our multifamily residents could use in order to collect that material and then send it to the compost site. This is in part being funded through the Climate Millage. Finally, bulky waste collection is something that's not currently offered at the curb for residents. The picture that you see, has a couch and a mattress in it. These things do pile up, especially during times of high turnover. And while we have options for drop-off to get rid of these items, we recognize that that might not be the most accessible or equitable option, as not everyone has a vehicle to move something, or they may not have the appropriate vehicle to haul what they need to haul. So we do have pricing under our contract with WM to provide this service to our residential customers, and it's something that we're exploring. We've also been working with a coalition of community partners and an effort called Move Out Ann Arbor to see what we can do to better recover items in good use for reuse during those high times of student turnover.
In recent years, the new bike infrastructure has emerged to meet our community's traffic calming, non-motorized safety, and alternative transportation goals. Some of these new road reconfigurations have presented some challenges to servicing solid waste, as Sarah said. As varying types of bike facilities were designed and constructed, we learned sometimes the hard way that modifications needed to be made to service curb carts. There have been challenges with the automated arm reaching across the bike lanes to reach carts on lawn extensions. There have also been instances where our equipment has been in conflict with a lot of the vertical delineators that are used in some of our buffer bike lanes. These trucks are 34 to 36 feet long, and so they're challenging to maneuver in and out and around delineators to safely service carts. So, of course, we must continue to provide the solid waste service, but how best to do it safely and efficiently will depend on the type of installation and how much room is available between the curb lines. To that end, Solid Waste is continuing to collaborate and coordinate with folks in engineering and transportation to ensure that new builds include solid waste function in the designs, providing space in the buffer zone for carts, or providing openings in the treatments to allow trucks to service carts placed at the curb or lawn extension when placement in the buffer zone is not possible. Communicating to residents about where to place the carts has also been an ongoing effort. As placement locations do differ based on the road width and treatment type, we've included a few examples here of the various sort of site-specific public education materials we've created to help residents understand where to put their carts so they can safely be serviced. And another challenge is preparing for the future. Adapting adapting our service to continue to be able to provide safe and efficient service as the city grows and densifies. We've just heard an update from the planning team that are working on the city's comprehensive land use plan with growth goals in the tens of thousands of new residents, and all of those future residents will generate waste. Solid Waste is planning now to ensure we can safely and efficiently collect from new developments, many of which are going to be higher density, multifamily, or mixed use. Staff reviews site plans to ensure solid waste can be serviced safely and efficiently once those buildings are occupied. Consolidated service points are commonplace in denser developments due to limited space and efficiency. For example, think of like a shared mailroom or a centralized cluster mailboxes. Those are standard in lots of multifamily developments. Solid waste collection can be a different type of consolidated service point in multifamily developments. They already exist in many locations in Ann Arbor and are common across the country. While we understand that some projects and developments would prefer to have individual curb cart service, urban density is not always compatible with suburban-style trash collection where dwellings get their own trash, recycling, organics carts for their exclusive use. On this slide, we have an example of where consolidated service is happening today. This is a Viridian South. This is from a page from the site plan for the solid waste collection plan. And so this is a multifamily neighborhood, owner-occupied homes and condos, and it's an example of consolidated service points. With the highlighting, just to make it a little bit clearer, you can see that they have modeled the turning movements of our different trucks to show that they can access a fewer number of points. They're not picking up at every single driveway, but that will allow them to make fewer stops, be less disruptive, and the garbage trucks can kind of get in and out of this neighborhood more quickly. So what do we do when we evaluate the serviceability of proposed site plan developments? So these newer developments are already coming in, we're already thinking about them, and there will be more. And so we're trying to make sure we have clear expectations about what we can and can't do with the equipment and staffing that we have. So what do we do when we review things? We are looking at each proposed development individually to determine if the proposed development can be serviced safely and efficiently, week over week, in all weather conditions, not on just the best days when everybody does everything right, with the existing equipment and staffing that we have. We ask them to provide solid waste generation calculations based on the type of proposed uses. And we look at those to make sure they're adequate and appropriate. That means, is there enough capacity to provide, not to have to require that site to be serviced every day? So we look at the number and the size of the use of the containers, making sure they're appropriate. We're also looking at the storage locations, the service location, and the solid waste service path of those, those 34 to 36 feet long trucks will need to use to access these spaces. We're looking at vehicle clearances, turning truck movements, and backup distances. We try to minimize the backup distances because of the risk to motorists and pedestrians and cyclists and buildings and vehicles and all sorts of other things in the public arena. And we also want to make sure the proposed plan reflects human behavior. Again, people can do things right one time or two times, but there's also a lot of demands on people's time and energy, and they can't always put carts in the right place predictably, or people turn over, and there's not, it doesn't always happen. And so, again, we want to do the best. We want to, again, make sure that there is the space needed for solid waste collection because it's a fact of life. Nobody wants to take valuable real estate and put it aside for solid waste, but it is something that we have to plan for. And so here's an example, another example we've been pulling straight from our plan review software. Here's an example of a current redevelopment plan that's showing both dumpster enclosures and trash rooms, and they're showing the turning radius and they're showing the backup distances to show that how this would be safely serviced and would make sure that these trucks are not backing straight into backing up into a major street, for instance. And so these two different servicing types on the same site both can work. And so this is, again, a consolidated service point that we think will work well in a lot of our multifamily developments. But we do know that it can seem confusing because some multifamily developments in Ann Arbor have cart service and others have dumpster service. And so we want to show you a couple examples to show you why and explain why that is. Here's a conceptual layout of a multifamily neighborhood proposed near Ellsworth. It's a private road as designed, but it functions and kind of looks like a public street. There's curb line. We feel like an automated sidearm truck could easily service each of these dwellings. Based on the site layout, there appears to be sufficient frontage for trash and recycling service. There's reasonable room for the turning movements and won't require the driver to back up significant distances or onto a major public road. Staff would be supportive of a cart or a dumpster servicing in this multifamily development because of the site conditions. Here's a different style, about the same size, about the same number of units, with a different type of layout. The paved area here is more akin to a parking lot than a public or private road. It would be harder to service efficiently with the automated armed vehicle. Show a laser pointer here. All right. So trying to service at a driveway or at a garage would require backing up distances. There's no space to turn around. Would require many stops that could block in people who are trying to get in and out of their homes. It's just a more challenging space just because of the site constraints. And so we also don't think there's sufficient frontage for about 150 carts, which would be needed for this type, for recycling and for trash. So we think a consolidated collection point or a shared dumpster is a much safer and more efficient option where a truck can enter in directly, service at a collection point, back up here, and then go out forward-facing back to a major road. We are not trying to be a roadblock. Our goal is to ultimately reduce future headaches for our future residents that will be living in these developments, our contractors who have to service them, and also our drivers who have to service.
Sky has walked you through different multifamily development layouts, including one that is newly constructed and functioning well. Some of you may be familiar with this townhome development, Nielsen Square, constructed in the early 2000s. As you can see from the aerial, the site's driveway configuration looks like it would be safe and efficient to service with automated sidearm trucks if residents appropriately space their carts in front of their garages. Functionally, this behavior does not happen. Garages are immediately adjacent to each other, requiring residents using a vehicle to exit their car in the drive aisle to properly set out carts. Same thing at the end of the day. The residents have to exit their car to move the carts to access the garage. As the photo on the right shows, neither of these carts can be serviced with the automated truck unless the driver were to pull them by hand, antithetical to the automated service approach. The residents in this association want to replace their carts for dumpsters, but there's little room available, and those locations identified for dumpster placement would require a site plan. We have a similar request from Cloverleaf Village, experiencing the same issues. We've successfully completed conversions in the last few years in locations both residential and commercial. Sky, I can't get where to go. Giving forethought to how we will service these new denser developments will save future servicing headaches. Particularly in our downtown, we lack alleys or other space for access and storage. We encounter bike facilities in various forms, and we're always looking to minimize conflicts with pedestrians, bicyclists, and vehicles whenever and wherever possible. These are examples of two recently reviewed site plans in the South University area where staff worked with the developers and their design teams to come up with a plan that, while not ideal, we feel is serviceable given the different space constraints. The one there to the bottom left, it's accessing between Church and South Forest. and we'll be pulling in and pulling out and servicing multiple dumpsters all at the same time, but it will work. We have the turning movements modeled, and we feel this will work. The one there to the right is off of South University, just to the north, and we will pull in, service a dumpster, and they provided a location for the truck to turn around and exit forward facing.
Finally, we wanted to bring to your attention a few items that are going to be coming up in the next several months. We'll be looking to revise the ordinance around hours for collection to allow more efficient service. We really need to be able to get in and out of downtown and other dense areas as early as possible to help reduce conflicts with cyclists, pedestrians, delivery trucks, motorists, and to maximize our route efficiency. Second here are the solid waste regulations, which is the rules document to complement the solid waste ordinance. Last had a major revision in 2011. Council did see a very recent update addressing carts and bike lanes specifically, but the whole document is a little out of date with our current practices, so a more robust revision of that is coming up soon. We're also looking to finalize our route optimization project. This is something that we had in our budget for this fiscal year as an impact, and we've been working to get it complete. We're looking to contract with a company to get that implemented, and we hopefully will be using a product to gather very detailed data about our collection so that we can feed that into an optimization model and rebalance our routes. This optimization is not only to make our collections efficient today, but also to provide a model for what resources will be needed as the city grows. Additionally, I mentioned earlier that we're looking at developing and expanding a drop-off network for food scrap to serve the more than half of our residents that live in multifamily properties and allow them access to that service. Lastly, we'll be coming forward with fleet replacement requests to replace equipment and add trucks to the fleet. All right. And I would like to close this out by saying thank you very much for your time and attention this evening. We enjoyed getting to share a little bit about what we do every day. And we'd also like to extend an open invitation to you. You are more than welcome to come out to the Wheeler Service Center at any time. Come on a ride along with us. Routes start early, 5:30, 6 a.m. start time. But there's no better way to see the skill and the technique and everything that our staff do than getting out and doing it with them. They do a very, very good job. As Allison mentioned, solid waste is one of those things that as long as it's working, as long as it's seamless, you don't really notice that it's happening. And we're fortunate that that is the case for us a majority of the time. We have a great team. We would love to have you out. So thank you again very much for your time, and we'll take any questions.
Thank you so much. One of the it's great having institutional knowledge, but one of the problems with institutional knowledge is that you have institutional knowledge, and when the march of progress or takes that knowledge, sometimes you fail to recollect that progress has occurred. This is with respect to our 8:45 public comment beginning time. Turns out that was a rule. We've changed it already. So it is no longer our comment rule. And so I guess let's roll with questions from council members, and then we will take public comment as we will on the back end. Councilmember Dish.
Thank you. This is a great presentation. And I'm already planning in my head which founding women I'm
Great. Yeah.
So I am really, really excited about the pilot funding for multifamily residential drop-off network for food scraps. It'd be lovely to see how much adoption that gets, because it's probably right now it's a good starting place rather than imagining that you can car. But I understand the paid healthy waste pickup option. I understand where you're from that. But if drop-off is an equity issue, so too will the trash pickup. And so if we can figure out how to defray that for some folks who might need that, that would be superb. And, honestly, I'm not offering a credit card, but perhaps there are ways that we can do that. I really appreciate all the work that you're doing to teach people, love those cards on our shoes, try to do things correctly so as not to flop things. It's not very complicated, but it's getting good. So the question about the multifamily developments. So we are, as a council, so eager to have housing density, and one way you get it is by going up. And so the couple of examples you gave us at the end of the presentation made a lot of sense to me around how you manage waste collection. It is a shared system, but it isn't really requiring people to go out of their way. I had concerns about, multifamily development fee. But I take your point about how development fee looks very different than development A, and take your point. But the collection point that was Stuart, I think it was, flagged for at least one side of multi-development fee. I imagine there would be two collection points, but I'm not sure. So you flagged it, it's down, it's on the left. Actually, that looks like it's in the collection point. So folks in the north part of this development, I just have trouble thinking that it's accounting for reasonable human behavior to imagine that people are going to walk that far, especially yesterday when it was freezing and icy. So I'm worried about this one, and it's an infill development of single-family attached homes, which is a housing typology that is liked, it's desired, and as an infill project, it's a bit on the outskirts. This one is going to come in at a price point, but it's also desired. And I'm worried about providing a solid waste model there that isn't desired. So I don't know what to say other than that. I'm just expressing my concern. I'm not trying to tell you to invent some drum that could handle it.
That would be great. Thank you. If you have the budget for it, we'll take it.
Yeah. But I think this one is in by your own critics a little bit
And I can offer some comments to that. The developer is welcome to add another collection point. That is something that we did point out to them. Having only one collection point is probably going to require more than one tip per week. Now, the bonus of that is it gets emptied more often, and so if anybody is concerned about whether or not trash smells, the tips are happening more frequently. But that is an option. The developer could provide a secondary access point.
And a secondary exit, which would allow you to...
Well, yeah, and there is a secondary exit shown. I think it's like emergency access. I don't know all the reasons why it's emergency versus full-time.
Is there, what if they wanted to hire a private service that would be willing to come in with a small truck or something? I don't know how they work, but I understand.
You want to address this one, Sarah?
Well, I mean, that's a different question, I think, but.
Well,
yeah.
we do have a solid waste millage, and we do have a solid waste ordinance, and the ordinance we do have a franchise contract hauler, like that is who we have, and it's not something, what you're suggesting is not something that we have ever allowed.
We have never in the city allowed private.
Correct.
Mm-hmm.
I've got Councilmember Malik.
Thank you guys so much for this presentation. I'm definitely interested in taking you up on the ride-along offer. I guess I'll just go ahead and say it. I personally am obsessed with compost. My head explodes every time Ann Arbor's compost system is discussed because I just get so excited about it. While I know our system is not perfect, the fact that we have regular residential curbside compost pickup is a huge accomplishment. I literally brag about this to my coworkers in Lansing who are from other areas of the state that don't even believe me that this is possible in any world, let alone the state of Michigan. So I bring it up pretty frequently. It's my understanding that many Ann Arbor residents use the compost service for lawn clippings and debris, but not really food waste yet. I wish more residents would use this feature, of course. So my question is related to education around compost, but also trash and recycling. Education was a common theme kind of throughout the whole presentation. So my question is, what are some plans moving forward as an approach to education? I'm aware of some of the outreach efforts, but I'm curious what else you guys have planned and what else you guys do kind of comprehensively.
Great, yeah. Thank you for the question. Thank you for your enthusiasm about compost. Again, if you want to, we can chat about that all day. I'm also very excited about it. We are looking at what we can do for education. It's my understanding that in years past, there was at least an annual mailer that would go out about solid waste services, and that is something that we've been working to bring back. That's at least a one-time-a-year touch point to let folks know about what can go in their card and what can't go in their card and where to find more information. But for food scrap diversion especially, because the state has a goal of diverting that, reducing food waste by 50% by 2030. There's also an EPA goal. So that's a big focus for us. And we have been working, she's not here, but quite closely with our friends in OSI to talk about how we could do a robust education campaign that really talks about not only composting, but also reducing food waste that's generated to begin with, and then what you do generate, composting, or if it's still edible, making sure someone eats it, and then composting what's left. So there's no definitive plan yet, but just to say there is a lot of focus on that, and we've been working very closely with them to figure out how we can raise awareness and get better diversion.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Councilmember Briggs.
Thank you. I don't know why you didn't think that we'd be super excited about this. We are. We love this topic. I also like our composting service and love using it year-round for food waste as well. So a couple questions, some pieces you raised around just the challenges of a growing city and changing land use, and, thank you. I know there's a lot of, we're advocating for a lot of changes on the street, and that's presenting some issues and growing rapidly. Are the limitations that we're facing, and I know we're kind of figuring out as we go a little bit, there are communities that have put in some, street reconfiguration similar to ours ahead of us, sometimes by decades. And so I'm just curious, where are we? Is it some of the equipment that we have that's just difficult to change out, or are these issues that are really every type of community is reckoning with?
I think most of them are issues that every community that has these types of facilities are dealing with. Downtown, it's a little less likely that, we're going to have the same issues because we're not servicing with the sidearm trucks as often, right? We've got more dumpster service downtown than we do the sidearm collectors. However, when we put this new bikeway down Miller, this is something that we are going to have to contend with. So, we are working with our friends in transportation and engineering to make sure that whatever we put out there, it's going to be clear to the residents what they need to do with their carts.
Yeah, thanks. Well, I think we're prepared to help with that education when it comes time. The other piece I was hoping you might be able to speak to a little bit is, a couple things. Maybe just a comment that anticipate that with earlier hours, particularly in downtown, that we might see some resistance or, some feedback around that. It's obviously when those trucks back up on multiple, they can be pretty loud. And so
we appreciate that. We do. We understand it. I have shared with planning, and I've even shared with developers, if you're building downtown and you've got dumpster service, even if you aren't proposing, but you're next to something with a dumpster, plan for good windows, plan for good insulation. It is a reality. This is not, you can't live in the downtown core and have suburban trash collection.
Mm-hmm. And then, finally, I don't know if you have time to be able to speak at all to sort of if we're having challenges with our recycling program right now in terms of contamination rates. That's something I'm just wondering how we're doing on that.
Thank you for the question. We're doing great. Yeah, we do biannual audits, composition audits, with our recycling partner, Recycling and Arbor. And in our processing agreement with them, we have a limit. We try to stay under 12% contamination. In our last audit that was completed in early November, we were like 11.6, I want to say. Don't hold me to the point, but we were under 12. So we're doing, really well. We have seen, since the MRF reopened in December of 21, and we've been doing these audits, we have seen some seasonality where the spring audit, although spring has ranged from May, June, July, just depending on scheduling when we get it scheduled, and winter, which winter has ranged from October, November, December, the spring does tend to have a little bit higher contamination rate than the fall, and that's something that we've been in conversation with our partner about to figure out. We've done, I think, 5 audits now, so we're starting to see that maybe this actually is a trend, and is there something there that we can address? We thought originally maybe it had something to do with student move out, like at the end of the spring semester, but as I mentioned, we've moved it around a couple of times to try to avoid that peak, which is sort of the end of April, early May, and we've still seen a little bit higher contamination. So it's just a little bit curious what's driving that. But even then, I would still say that our program looks really good.
Okay, thanks. And actually, I did think of one more question. That's okay. What's our partnership look like with the Ann Arbor Public Schools in terms of with the Ecology Center and education? I've just been disappointed at times when I go to school events and notice how little recycling is happening. I'm just curious if that's something that really is a school-led piece of things, or if that is, that's a partnership that we're working on.
Well, we do have a contract with the Ecology Center to provide education and outreach and marketing for all of our programs. One of those areas is youth education. The city's had a long partnership with the Ecology Center for Youth Education. In the current contract, we did broaden the work areas to include commercial, multifamily, community events, and a social-based marketing campaign. And the youth education piece was structured such that every student in a second grade class and every student in a 7th grade class gets a program from the Ecology Center. So they are getting, the 2nd grade programming is in partnership with the Freeman Environmental Center. They go there for a field trip. Half day is the Ecology Center doing trash stuff. Very cool Lego model of a landfill, and it's just really fabulous. And then the 7th grade program, they take a bus tour of our Resource Recovery Center, so they get to drive by the closed landfill, the compost facility, the transfer station, the MRF, and see where everything that gets picked up goes. So we are still very invested in that education program with youth. I think in terms of operations at the school for programs, that is more on the schools, yes.
Got it. Yeah, and maybe what I'm witnessing is parent volunteers setting up stuff in the high school level that are maybe not as attentive, so thanks. Appreciate it.
Councilmember Watson.
I do want to second all of my council members' comments on appreciating the work of the solid waste team here and your presentation today. I had a constituent that lived in a condo association reach out to me actually earlier today asking about the size of city compost bins. And am I correct in saying that the city had at one point offered the smaller 32-gallon compost bins, and I know that we still offer those, I think, for recycling, and I'm not sure about trash, but was there a reason that we no longer offer 32-gallon smaller compost bins, and is there any question of whether that might help in some of these multifamily scenarios?
I can't speak to if we ever offered a 32-gallon compost cart. I can tell you that we have stopped issuing 32-gallon recycle and trash carts for the very reason that they fall into the trash truck. So it's just a hazard, it's too small, and so we have stopped issuing those.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
An excellent example of the stuff that goes on in the city every single day, working for the residents. Mr. Dahone, you want to close it out prior to public comment?
Thank you. I just wanted to point out, you've been seeing a wide variety of people presenting to you, that is intentional. We need to give more of our professional staff the opportunity to speak in front of council, to show the expertise that they have. It's a part of professional development, but it also demonstrates it takes a full team of people in order to provide the functionality to our residents each day. So yeah, it's a lot of folks coming at you, but it shows the different roles that they play, and we're going to continue it. So thank you.
Well, without having polled council fully, I can say that we're delighted by what we hear and delighted by the people that come and speak it. So more the merrier. Come on down. Speaking of come on down, it's now an opportunity for public comment. Public comment is an opportunity for members of the public to speak to council and the community about matters of municipal interest. To speak at public comment, one need not have signed up in advance when you're attending a work session. Speakers in all instances will have 3 minutes in which to speak, so please pay close attention to the time. Our clerk or the time clock will notify you when 30 seconds are remaining and when your time has expired. When your time has expired, please conclude your remarks and cede the floor. Is there anyone in house who would like to speak at public comment?
Good evening. Thanks for the discussion tonight. I wanted to quickly revisit a couple of the mandates that you set forward for the comp plan process. These included densification of housing districts throughout the city, fewer zoning districts, and policies that undo or seek to repair past land use practices that resulted in exclusion of people. There are three major items that worry me the most about the draft right now, each of which appear to contradict the goals you've laid out. One that wasn't highlighted tonight is the proposed restriction on the expansion of the downtown, which contradicts virtually all the feedback I saw in the public meetings. A new transition district is proposed to be 80 feet and surround the downtown to the north in the non-historic area, to the east of campus near Getty's and Washtenaw, to the south of South U, south of William, and in Lowertown. And capping this area to 80 feet would limit buildings where they're being proposed the most, preventing more like the ones you approved on Forest and Church. It would also make Five Corners and Beekman illegal. In the short term, this is the most concerning proposal in my view. There's no need to taper down density for several blocks. Another concern is the creation of special districts that restrict or prohibit housing, employment, innovation, and retail, which you guys discussed tonight. On the surface, the employment zone is appealing from the standpoint of preserving some businesses that a lot of us know and love, but these come and go on their own. And in my opinion, it's preferable not to try to freeze them where they are and exclude housing, but rather to allow housing to grow among those businesses. And if the housing pressure is so great that some of those businesses are eventually displaced, this means that housing is desperately needed and should be allowed. And the solution for cultivating a small business ecosystem is to allow them to relocate and start in places where they're currently not allowed. Like low-density neighborhoods. In addition, apartment buildings create tons of blue-collar jobs to support them, plumbing, electrical, HVAC, et cetera, far in excess of the jobs in the low-density buildings they would replace. The Innovation District on Plymouth would attach some implied mandates for office and research space. If there's a fear of residential overwhelming available property, again, that's because there's a severe shortage and it should be allowed to be built. I have no doubt that tech firms who someday may really want office space near North Campus will build it if they can withstand the taxes and expensive land that they would have to endure to locate there. And as it is now, there's a glut of office space, so that's making residential cost prohibitive if we attach a mandate. With regard to the retail zone, I echo the comment that allowing incremental one-story redevelopment of Arbor Lane and Westgate would be misguided because it would initiate another round of long-term leases and perpetuate this auto-dominated land reform. We need bold policy change, and I would suggest that this means not iterating from the status quo, but rather asking where should we deliberately exclude or limit housing and why. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else in house who would like to speak at public comment?
So Darian Newbecker, President, Robertson Homes, 6905 Telegraph Road, Bloomfield Hills, Michigan 48301. I just wanted to speak real briefly. I thought the presentation on solid waste was completely fair. Some of the challenges that they face. I guess just one thing I want to point out that our organization is involved in a number of projects in Ann Arbor. We've got a large project we've been in front of you a number of times on the north side called the Village of Ann Arbor. That's going to be around 600 homes. We've got another one that's working its way through the process called 75 South. That's 75 townhouses, which ironically was that was development plan B that you saw up there earlier. So we are the developer. We did look at a second dumpster location. The basis of everything I'm going to say tonight is the fact that there has to be some level of compromises for certain development styles. So could we put another dumpster location? Of course. It just means a loss of, probably 2 to 4 more units. So one of the things from a housing typology that I think you guys or your city needs more of is a housing style we do a lot of at Robertson, which is 3-story townhouses. So they build at 14 to 18 units per acre. The development that you saw before our development B, that was 2-story townhouses. So those build at 6 to 8 units per acre. They have an individual driveway. So curb pickup there for trash is not an issue. On 3-story townhouses, because they're 14 to 18 units per acre, they come with some challenges. So I can tell you that we've built in a dozen communities those projects, and I've never had to put a dumpster in. I just haven't. How they get picked up, that, I'm happy to go and take videos of the dozen communities we have active and how they get trash service. I suspect the disconnect here is trash service and that type of product type, if you're going to build at that density level, which I think you want, I don't think it's reasonable to expect that you're going to be able to use side load automated. It's just, the units are 3 stories tall, and you have to compromise if you want that level of density. And it's an important product type. It transitions from your vertical buildings to your 2-story residential areas. It gets you the densities you want. It gets you at price points you want. So we would just ask for some level of compromise. Can I put a dumpster in? Absolutely. My intentions, unless I'm legally told I can, is I'm going to build if I have to build it, I will, because I have to build every day. So I have to compromise as a developer. But what I would intend to do, unless I'm told legally I can't, is I will probably contract at my own cost. I will build a dumpster, I'll put everything in there, and then I'll pay for private service to show that it can be done safely and efficiently. Because again, I'm building in downtown Farmington, I'm building in downtown Detroit, the same product type, no dumpsters. So I don't know where the disconnect is, but I can take videos of exactly how our stuff's being serviced, and it's not being serviced in a unsafe or inefficient manner. So that's all I have. So, wow, perfect.
Thank you. Is there anyone else in house who'd like to speak at speak at public comment?
Hi, my name is Tom Huang. I live at 2795 Wynwood Drive, and I'm affiliated with the University Urbanism Club. We have a few members here earlier, but since it's getting late, people left. So I came in today trying to talk about the employment zone and innovation hub. I know last time during the Planning Commission session, some people fired shots at the employment zone, which currently prohibits residential use. But if you actually took a look at the map, I think most of them are located right along railroads or directly adjacent to highway, and I believe those aren't desirable residential land anyways. But if we look at Innovation Hub, that is prime location up north, and I would argue that currently the biggest shortage up north is not residential units, but actually commercial, because I know a lot of friends who go to school at North Campus, and some people who don't live up north, the first reason is not because we don't have enough housing units up north, but because there's close to no amenities for any kind of social events or just dining places up north. And I think I heard about the worry that residential units might just take over the plan, but what if we prioritize that to become commercial use rather than residential, instead of prioritizing, let's say, office space? Because I know we are under the university, but we don't necessarily have to speak in favor of them. And my point is, if the university is not doing due diligence in providing students and staff with enough good options to eat and shop, then why does the city have to provide office space for like venture companies coming out of the university? And in my opinion, that piece of land, which is located at the intersection of major roads and where transit converges, should be better off used for commercial, whether that's more retail stores or better dining options, rather than to facilitate more office space. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Sophia. I am also a biomedical engineering student at the University of Michigan, and I live at Beekman in Ward 1. Go Ward 1. This is my first time speaking at public comment. I just wanted to share a little bit about my housing journey in Ann Arbor. Basically, I found it to be very expensive to be able to get everything you want or need out of housing. I lived in a very tall, high-rise building in downtown, which was great. I loved the proximity, but it was very expensive. I lived in a mid-rise apartment complex on North Campus, which was nice and peaceful, but it was very hard to access grocery stores or things around me, so I left there. Now I live in Ward 1 in a mixed use place, and I love it, but it's very, very expensive. So I just want to reiterate that it's very hard to find housing that meets all of your needs. And I do think that housing, we are in a crisis in Ann Arbor. It's really, really hard, and a lot of students either have to pay a lot to find housing that supports them, or you live in rundown old houses that are not well maintained. And it's kind of either or. You're either paying too much or not getting what you need. So I would just ask that council kind of take some time to really understand the student perspective with that struggle to housing, and also allow for densification and relax those limits. I think people can learn to love a lot of things, and we heard a lot about that 4-unit mandate, and maybe that's like that can be relaxed potentially if we go back to the community and say, hey, how does this sound? I think that there are a lot of people that would be okay with that, because they do understand that housing is desperately needed. That's all I have to say. Thanks.
Thank you. Is there anyone else in house who'd like to speak at public comment? Is there anyone online who'd like to speak at public comment?
Mayor, we have a couple people online. Adam Juskevich, do you have a comment?
Hi, this is Adam Juskevich calling from the 4th Ward. I wrote to you last week with some specific concerns that I had with what was presented to Planning Commission. I still have those concerns after watching tonight's presentation. If you have not yet done so, I encourage you to watch that discussion and the public comments. Tonight, I would like to make some more general points about the comprehensive plan rather than reiterating those concerns. A comprehensive plan is, in a very real sense, our vision for the future of Ann Arbor's built environment. I realize that some people are not comfortable with change, and this vision feels scary to them. But others are comfortable with change and, in fact, welcome it. Yes, change can be disruptive, but it can also be constructive. The status quo is not working. We are in a housing crisis, and we are in a climate crisis. We can choose to be bold, to write a comprehensive plan that embraces change and helps move us toward a positive vision for the future of Ann Arbor, or we can choose to be timid, to thread the needle in an attempt to preserve neighborhood character by watering down that vision. I hope to see a comprehensive plan that allows for density and forms of housing we need throughout the city to dig ourselves out of our housing crisis. Now is not the time for the exclusionary land use policies of the past. Let's strive for a greater future Ann Arbor for all. Thank you.
Thank you.
Caller with the phone number ending in 194, press *6 to unmute your phone. Go ahead.
Hello, this is Rita Mitchell calling. I live at 621 5th Street.
And I am a member of the Environmental Commission, but I wanted to just let you know that I'm speaking for myself tonight. And I appreciate the review of the comprehensive plan. I would like to encourage the staff and Planning Commission as they move forward to explicitly include elements of natural features in the comprehensive plan that acknowledge the importance of trees and vegetation to support carbon sequestration, heat island effects, filtering of water and air, and habitat for animals of all types, as well as the natural health benefit of exposure to natural features for humans. So as we move forward with densification, which sounds like a solid movement that's being planned for, that's great. But I want to make sure that as we move forward, we identify the essential nature and include natural features that help us make this be the livable, the lovable, and walkable city that we want to have. Imagine walking down streets without trees. Nobody's going to want to be that in that walkable type of neighborhood. Imagine walking down streets without any kind of green appearing. It's just pretty uninteresting. So I just want to make sure that there's an incorporation and that it is applied as a natural course of the planning process. That's my wish. Thank you very much. I will be continuing to watch.
Thank you.
Caller with the phone number ending in 534. Press star 6 to unmute your phone. Go ahead.
Good evening. This is Tom Stallberg, calling from Lower Town, Ann Arbor. I want to say hello to my neighbor over at Beekman. That's very close to you. I also want to echo what the last caller just said. An important part of the comprehensive plan is helping us develop an ecosystem for the city of Ann Arbor, a place where we can all live, not just be warehoused. I'd also like to mention the Robertson Brothers development. That he mentioned a couple of them, but the one in particular on the north side with entrance to South Pontiac Trail and Duvarin, I'd like to commend the developer on the mixed housing types that are a part of that development, both for ownership and for rent, and different types of housing heights, detached, attached, apartment buildings versus townhomes. And hopefully in the comprehensive plan, we can find ways to encourage a mix of housing types, not to have monolithic types of development by essentially just deregulating and letting the market give us whatever the market wants to give us. I want to turn to something very specific, and again, as we develop the comprehensive plan, I want to make sure that we accommodate things that directly meet our goals, as opposed to just deregulating and hope for indirect measures to meet our goals. One of the things that can directly meet our goals of attainably priced home ownership, that's something really lacking right now in Ann Arbor. I'm a broker, I'm a landlord, this is my business. I used to develop subdivisions. I don't do that anymore. I moved here 30 years ago, moved back, bought a triplex with two friends, went on to buy a couple duplexes, and have helped a lot of other people find home ownership in duplexes. And that's one way to do it. There's a new way now. I want to mention the Ann Arbor Community Land Trust. It's a nonprofit, a2clt.org, for anybody who wants more information. I'm not a member of that group officially, but I've been working with them, investing with them, and proselytizing now for Ann Arbor Community Land Trust, because it's a way that we can have home ownership attainably priced. Anybody who wants to talk to me about it, I intend to talk to all the council members directly about this. It's happening. We're making it happen. There's going to be homes delivered, hopefully, before the end of this calendar year, and a lot more next calendar year.
30 seconds.
We are looking to have our critical workers, people who are essential to the life of the city, who cannot buy in the city under the current market forces. making a way that they can buy attainably priced homes. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Adam Goodman, do you have a comment?
Hi, yes. This is Adam Goodman. I'm speaking to you from the 5th Ward. I also want to recommend that all of you actually watch the full Planning Commission discussion from, I believe it was January 23rd. I think tonight, because you had a much more limited amount of time and staff were, they were upfront about this. They're trying to explain to you a position that they don't entirely agree with. So I think some things got a little jumbled and distorted tonight, and it would be much better if you actually heard the full discussion from, straight from those folks' mouths. I'll give you one example, which is this discussion about limiting to 4 units per site in low-density residential zone. I don't think that was at all about looking for more density or larger buildings. It's about more flexibility. If we limit it to 4plexes, then you're actually creating an incentive in a lot of areas to make a particular type of housing, which is 6-bedroom units. We're seeing this happen now under our current zoning code. So why should we allow you to build 4 6-bedroom units, but prevent you from building 6 2-bedroom units? The latter is actually less dense. It's half as many beds. And yet, if we go with a unit density-based limit, then this is the situation that we're creating. But even more fundamentally than that, I believe we should get away from regulating, density through this means for a pretty basic reason, which is that I don't think government should be in the business of defining what a family is. And our Unified Development Code right now literally does this. You can look it up. If we move towards just building form-based restrictions, I'm much more comfortable with that because, I just don't think regulating what a family is the government's business. Finally, and maybe most importantly, I would like you all to be thinking very right now about what the next steps are after the comprehensive plan is done. As Mr. Leonard said, the comprehensive plan doesn't change anything on its own. Then we have to get into the business of revising the Unified Development Code. And if we do this the way that we've approached in the past, which is to say, gradually work through piecemeal amendments, we will never finish. We have not yet finished implementing the 2009 land use element. And so what I would suggest is that you look at, for example, Charlottesville, Virginia, which actually went through an entire comp plan and comprehensive zoning rewrite in a period of 4 years. And so I think Ann Arbor should do something like that. We're already behind schedule to actually meet that deadline, but we should try to do that. And in order to do that, you need to put funding in the budget this year for a zoning rewrite. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mayor, I don't have any other callers online with their hands raised.
Seeing no one, public comment is closed. Can I have a motion to adjourn, please? Moved by Councilor Udina, second by Councilor Harrison. Discussion? All in favor? Opposed? We're adjourned.